All right, so we're back for another Lorcana video, and today I'm gonna go through a bunch of cards, basically the best cards you can pick up, or at least the ones in my opinion that you should look out for after the September 1st release. And there are a lot of people thinking that this is gonna be a godsend from the retail gods coming down to flood the market and lower prices. And honestly, in my humble opinion, I don't think it's really gonna do too much. I think there is a fundamental allocation issue all across for first chapter, or the first chapter. That's another video that I don't really want to discuss, but if anything, I wanted to use this as a reference when the second chapter, or really a couple weeks from now even, to take a look at the prices, and as well as just to give a little advice for anything that you should look out for in each ink color. And of course, subscribe if you are new. Check out my other videos for Lorcana, especially the one about ink colors, because it's going to go in depth for every single ink color and talk about a lot of the major cards for it as well. So let's take a look at the cards itself, starting with Amber. Some of these cards should be no surprise, starting with Rapunzel. Rapunzel is really, really good. There's not really a way to say otherwise, she has high willpower, pretty low cost for what she does with 2 lore, for and inkable. I think they should have just toned it down a little bit for the balance and not make her inkable. But I think where this game is going is where the staples and as well as the altards are going to be relatively expensive, along with some of the other things that are not going to be so expensive, like some of the rares and as well as other things like that. Although this Lilo that we talk about is a rare, which is going to be kind of expensive, getting into those double-digit numbers. Again, Rapunzel has that 2 lore, pretty low cost. It can couple with some of the things like the other things in Amber, like the bodyguard Simba, or any of the other colors that have bodyguard. You can have bigger threats later into the game, things with bigger or higher willpower like Maleficent in blue or whatever it may be, and then just heal up to 3 and then draw those 3 cards, which is pretty crazy because in this game drawing is kind of hard. The things that are going to be more expensive and the things that are going to be sought out for are going to be those draw engines, and as well as those things that enable that. Next is Stitch, and speaking of drawing, shifting on 4 or turn 4 and then continuing to play other cards after that, like Lilo or anything else that are 2 or less, you can actually exert them and then continue to draw those cards. The other cool thing is that you pair this with Lantern or Dr. Facilier, whatever it may be, those type of things come together with Stitch for him to be kind of a really good sought after card. He is a pretty tanky card too, like 5 willpower just like Rapunzel, 3 lore if you really want to quest with them. Usually you don't want to, and not a bad late game kind of card. I've talked about it before, where this is going to be one of those cards that is really good for newer players and players who are used to drawing cards and as well as doing combo effects like this. But later into the meta, or at least the format, and people who are getting used to these cards and getting more and more cards into their card pool, I think Stitch is going to be less and less played because it is just only 1 card. And things like red with Dragonfire, Maleficent or whatever, or even green returning back to hand, or blue with Let It Go and putting it back into their equal, or Hades, things like that really deter that sort of strategy. So you have to be really careful if you are going to be investing into like a Stitch deck. But the very cool counterpart to that is Lilo, and she is awesome even without the ink card or the inkableness being able to put in your inkwell. Being a 1/2 lore is crazy because you play this, you play Simba right after, you could protect her, and if they don't have any spot removal like in Steel, then Lilo is just going to stand there and sit there with that 2 lore over and over, and it gets really out of hand after every single turn. And you pair that with Rapunzel with your Simba, you have now a Simba that can get healed, and you can draw, you can keep drawing into Lilo's, you can keep drawing into the Stitch, etc., and then you just keep going. That's why these cards are super important and super sought after, and just in general. Next up is going to be Purple or Amethyst, and these are like the bigger threats threats, right? These are the late game big girls and boys, and these are going to be paired with blue or sapphire or ruby because they pair well together. Like, you know, ruby amethyst really wants to get to that late game, and you know, with Be Prepared, you can sing with both of these guys and then play one right after. You can do that. You can pair it with shield, where you can quest shield and then sing with Be Prepared and then play another one, and then you're just going to be ahead into that late game so often, which is why Amber and the cards that we just talked about are super important. But that's not without Maleficent. Well, Maleficent is just like Lilo. It's just the purple counterpart, which I think in the future, just to give you my card game knowledge, experience, and as well as design, you know, for the future, which I don't have much design at all, if any. They're probably going to have these one costed, no ink, 1/2 lore cards in the future, right? Like they're going to be, I think in every single ink color, they're going to be one of these. But it's not gonna hurt. It's not gonna hurt to pick this one up, and as well as Lilo, especially if they're gonna be dropping after the September 1st retail release. But we will see. Elsa, again, is such a good late game card. You can shift for 6, but 8 is really not that big of a deal, because by that time, if you're surviving by then, you're going to be locking them down, and as well as having this 3 lore 6 4/6 big old body. Same thing with Ursula, where you ping for that lore, sure, but you do get to draw a card. You have that 3 lore, and it's a 2/8, which means these little boys and girls, these little characters that they may have, you know, they are going to be eaten right up by Ursula pretty easily. Next up is Emerald, and we're going kind of down a list of, you know, most expensive to less popular type of deal, and I think Emerald's really in a good place. I think it's, again, still my favorite color outside of blue at this point. Flynn Rider is so good, you know, having that 2 cost, 2 lore, punish them for challenging the card. You can trade into these Lilos and its Maleficents pretty easily if you really wanted to, and still survive, and still be in exerted mode where, you know, basically they're gonna have to discard one. So it's a win-win for a lot of the things that Flynn Rider does, and being inkable is also huge. Hans, or Hands, whatever you want to call it, is 3/3. His stats aren't amazing. I really love Hans, I really do. It's a 4 for 3 lore. That's all he is good for, right? He is a boy who gets down, dies to Rafiki, and as well as trades into these 2/2s pretty easily, if need be. Like if they really wanted to, they will swing into it. But really, him along with Maleficent, both of those are going to be pretty similar to costs, him being 4, her being 5, with those 3 lores. So if you're going to be playing something that has a lot of lore, a lot of things attached to them and to quest into, Hans is going to be part of that strategy for sure. Now, Kuzco is good because in Amber you can play just in time, where you can play it out for free or for that 3 cost, I believe, or you can sync into Kuzco right after, and that's important where you have Rapunzel that can do that for you, and it has ward and it has 3 of that lore. Again, trades in those 2/2s pretty well, and when it does get banished, you can banish whatever challenging character that is. So if you're playing into the late game of Ruby or Amethyst, then Kuzco does that really well, where they can't Dragonfire, they can't Maleficent, and if they swing into it, most of those bigger bodies are going to get punished for it. And right into the boogeyman of Lorcana, in my opinion, a very strong color, one of the strongest in the game right now, with Maui being 6'5". Oh man, 6'5", such a huge body that even gets rid of things like Maleficent, and as well as almost like Ursula and things like that. His Russian Reckless for 5 that has ink is sort of ridiculous. Like, he is, again, I've talked about it before in other videos, he is such a staple. And speaking of, Be Prepared. Be Prepared is a uninkable card. I think it is probably the most annoying card in the game right now. I can't really think of anything else outside of Elsa, maybe. Like, all these other things can kind of be taken care of pretty easily, but you can't play around Be Prepared, which is why it's going to be popular, which is why you should pick it up, right? I don't think they're going to be doing anything with the first set to do like ban lists or anything like that. Second set, have no idea, and it might be phased out. Like, this type of card usually gets phased out as the game gets faster and faster and more effects are going to be around. But that also means that if it does stick around like Dark Hole and Yu-Gi-Oh, and then it doesn't get banned, but it did get banned later on for Dark Hole, and that's a whole different other story. Be Prepared is going to be still pretty strong because it is again such a regulator for those late game decks. So like ramp things like Play into Maleficent or Elsa or Ursula or even Aladdin. I didn't put Aladdin here because he comes in the starter deck, so it's not really hard to get a hold of him. A lot of starter decks going to be open, and it's going to be pretty low value, which is going to be pretty easy to get, right? But Be Prepared can't be played around very like well or easy because War doesn't get around it. I can make a whole video about Be Prepared, honestly. But Maleficent, spot removal, that's a 7/5, really hard to get rid of. I still think she should have 3 lore for the cost that she is, but she is a big body that gets rid of pretty much anything through challenging and as well as removal, and she is a legendary. I mean, there's not really much to say about her. So second to last is going to be Sapphire. So Hades, Let It Go, and Bell. So these are all part of that ramp strategy for Sapphire, which is pretty much the best thing that it has going for it. I think it's kind of a weaker color, but it is a really good complementary color because of ramp. It has these 2 spot removals in Hades and as well as Let It Go, while you are giving them resources later into the game when they have like 2 or 3 cards in hand. It doesn't really matter because you're just going to give that into the Inkwell, and then they have to start top decking. You know, they're going to have to start finding those answers in order to get around the things that you just did. So Hades being a 3/6, not bad. 2 lore, not bad. But uninkable, pretty bad, but that's okay. Let It Go is a little bit better because things can sing into it. So like Aurora or any of the higher 5 cost cards, the Crab, obviously Hades, these things can get rid of things for free, which is super important. And then there's Bell. Bell is super good because it kind of warps the game. While you have 2 bells on board, you can put 4 cards into your Inkwell. And that's pretty crazy when you pair it with a whole new world where you can just refresh your hand. So, you know, those type of things and those type of strategies that get you into those 10 or more cards in the Inkwell are super important. So that way you can have 5 lore and you can win pretty quickly if they don't have removal for it, which again is why Let It Go and Hades are important, which is again why Be Prepared is also important. It kind of just says no to all those strategies. And lastly is going to be Steel. Not much to write home about Steel. I think it's the cheapest color to play, which is why you're going to be seeing a lot of it in locals, I think. Just because it's so accessible. It's not so much as it's a bad color per se. It's just, you know, I think a lot of the other colors just do things a little bit better. Tinkerbell is really good, especially since you can shift into 4. You can pretty much get rid of a lot of threats on the turn you do play Tinkerbell, or the turn after, because she does deal 1 to all of it. It kind of slows down that amber or even purple, maybe even emerald strategies for those low to the ground, high lore cards. And you know, being able to do 2 damage is also really good. Whole New World, just like to talk about in the ramp, you can ramp all the cards in your hand. You can use the item to Inkwell anything in your hand, and then Whole New World right after it. You can pair this with green or emerald to mill them out, you know, that type of thing, and then grab your sword, dealing 2 damage for everything. You know, these kind of, you know, you can kind of understand where I'm coming from for some of these cards, and they are really quite good. That's it. That's all I got. Hopefully this kind of gives you a little bit of an idea, and as well as some perspective about the market as well after September 1st. And again, I personally don't think there's going to be much of a difference when it comes to the prices and things like that. That's just my wholehearted opinion. I've been through many markets at this point for card games, and I don't think this one's much different. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, even though it has the Disney name. I don't know, but either way, I am happy to be wrong. That means I can build more decks because I have 2 very janky decks right now, and I'm very happy to, you know, to get more cards and at a reasonable price. So let me know what you think in the comments below. If you have any honorary mentions for any of these ink colors too, I'm happy to hear it. So I'll see you next one.